Chapter 165. The moment Gu Mengmeng laid on her back, Elvis rushed towards her almost instinctively. His hand was in midair and he could not grab hold of Gu Mengmeng in time. The uneasiness in his heart grew rapidly and without any hesitation. Elvis jumped into the lake and hugged Gu Mengmeng, who was holding her breath and sinking tightly in his arms. With a push of his feet, he came out of the water. The lake water was already very cold. It was nothing to males, but it could be fatal to females. Elvis did not have the time to scold her. He frantically carried the shivering Gu Mengmeng and ran into the cave. As he ran, he howled towards the sky, as if he was sending some kind of message. Gu Mengmeng's mind was in a daze. Her stomach churned from the jolting of Elvis's journey, and she poured out a lot of water from her mouth and nose. After Elvis carried Gu Mengmeng back to the cave, he quickly took out a thick beast's skin to wipe her dry before wrapping her up. Then, he used the firewood he had prepared earlier to start a fire. When everything was ready, Elvis transformed into a wolf and used his abdomen to protect the frozen Gu Mengmeng, using his own body heat to maintain her body temperature. Unfortunately, Gu Mengmeng had been tormented too much these few days. Her body was already weak during her period of menstruation, and the cold water made her even more uncomfortable. She curled up and closed her eyes tightly, looking as pitiful as an abandoned baby. Not long after, Elvis heard movement at the entrance of the cave. He transformed into a human and gently placed Gu Mengmeng beside the fire. He stroked her hair and murmured bitterly, "Can't I?" Gu Mengmeng did not respond. She hugged her shoulders tightly and curled up her body as much as possible. She was uneasy and in pain. Elvis kissed her forehead lightly and said in a comforting tone, It's all right now. The person you want is here. I'll let him come in and accompany you, all right?" Gu Mengmeng opened her eyes. Her eyelids were sore and painful. She reached out weakly and held onto Elvis's fingers. She asked in a hoarse voice, "Who is here?" Elvis smiled bitterly and answered, "Leah, he's here. He's at the border of the territory. I'll call him in to see you and let him accompany you, all right?" Suddenly, Gu Mengmeng's nose turned sour and she started crying. She choked with sobs and couldn't speak. She just shook her head desperately. Elvis looked at her strangely and said with heartache, "What's wrong? Why are you crying again?" Gu Mengmeng did not reply and just shook her head while crying. She used all her strength to grab onto Elvis's fingers, but still felt that it was not firm enough. She was afraid that Elvis would pull his hand out to call Leah in. Elvis frowned and wiped away Gu Mengmeng's tears with heartache. He stood beside her and hugged her in his arms to soothe her uneasiness. He whispered into her ear, "Aren't you torturing yourself because of him?" Gu Mengmeng did not say a word and just shook her head furiously in Elvis's arms. Elvis could not bear for her to be so agitated, so he tried asking, "You don't want to see him? Then, should I let him leave?" Only then did Gu Mengmeng calm down. She slowly loosened her grip on Elvis's fingers and continued hugging her shoulders, curling herself into a ball. Elvis sighed. He could never understand what Gu Mengmeng was thinking about. The only thing he could do was to follow her wishes. Since she did not want to see Leah, then so be it. Elvis walked out of the cave and saw Leah standing at the border of his territory. He asked, "You're not coming in?" Lee's gaze was empty and distant. He smiled bitterly and replied, "This place is no longer a place that I can enter as I please." Aside from the topic, in order not to be stuck, there will be an update later to clarify what exactly was going on with Leah. Chapter 166. Elvis remained silent and did not reply. Leah took a deep breath and took the initiative to ask, "She doesn't want to see me?" Actually, Leah heard everything that Elvis said to Gu Mengmeng in the cave. He even heard her sobbing and shaking her head clearly. Elvis nodded his head slightly and pressed his lips into a straight line. But Leah smiled and said with bitterness and a tinge of relief, "She doesn't want to see me. Luckily, she doesn't want to see me." Elvis looked at Leah in confusion and did not say anything. He only used his gaze to ask for Leah's opinion. Leah heaved a long sigh of relief and said, She doesn't want to see me because she still hates me. Still hates me. At least it means that she has me in her heart. Elvis did not really understand Lee's logic and only told him about Gu Mengmeng being soaked in cold water and how he handled it. Leah nodded his head and said, "You handled it well. Before I came, I had already asked Bode to cook a pot of water shuttle and added a lot of yellow roots. Sandy will send it over in a while. Coax Mengmeng to drink more." Elvis nodded his head in agreement and then looked at Leah. "Then you?" Leah waved his hands and said, "The most important thing now is for you to mate with Mengmeng before winter. Only after you successfully become Mengmeng's first partner can I tell Mengmeng the truth and think of a way to ask for her forgiveness." Elvis asked, "Are you confident that she will forgive you?" Leah shook his head and smiled bitterly. "No, I'm just gambling. I'm gambling that, in her heart, I'm more important than her principles." Elvis sighed and said, "Why did you choose Nina back then? If you choose Sandy, there's still someone who can help you when you explain to Xiao Meng in the future." But Leah shook his head and said, "How can I let her lose her best friend at the same time when she loses her lover? She likes Sandy so much. It's always good to have Sandy accompany her when she's sad because of me." Elvis remained silent and stood at the same spot, not knowing what to say. But Leah used his chin to point at his leg and asked, "How did you explain your injury to Mengmeng?" Elvis's expression darkened and he said in a low voice, "She didn't ask, so I didn't explain." Leah patted Elvis's shoulder and said, "Bring out the aura you had when you fought with me that day. I did not hesitate to land myself in such a situation just to see you helpless in front of Mengmeng." Elvis was silent. He had nothing to say. Actually, he did not mind that he was not Gu Mengmeng's first partner. Nor did he mind that Gu Mengmeng liked Leah more than him. He only wanted to stay by Gu Mengmeng's side to take care of her, protect her and watch over her. But Gu Mengmeng's insistence on maintaining monogamy had forced him into a dead end. He did not mind being neglected or being wronged, but leaving her and losing her was his bottom line. This was the only thing he could not agree to. So that night, he went to look for Leah and used the usual method of males in the beast world to decide who would protect Gu Mengmeng. He had won, but seeing how upset Gu Mengmeng was because of Lee's departure, Elvis had been asking himself for the past 2 days, was he wrong? Maybe he should not have won. Leah and Elvis had many years of friendship, fighting side by side and risking their lives so many times, so they had a deep understanding of each other. Even if Elvis did not say anything, Leah understood what he was thinking. "Don't feel guilty. Losing to you was my own decision. We all know that this is the best choice, isn't it?" Aside from the topic, branches. Looking at Elvis carrying Gu Mengmeng off, the smile on Lee's face slowly froze. He frowned in disgust and ordered coldly, "Take your dirty hands off me." Nina, who was hugging Lee's waist and feeling pleased with herself, was stunned by Lee's roar. She looked up at Leah blankly, only to realize that his eyes were still staring at the direction Gu Mengmeng disappeared in, not even sparing her a glance. "If I hear you casually express your opinion in front of Mengmeng again, I don't mind the number of females in Saint Nazir becoming 3. As Leah said that, he took out a beast-skin rope from his waist and tied 2 strands of long hair behind his ears before folding it inwards. This was the hairstyle Mengmeng had praised. She said it looked good. "Leah, how can you speak to me like this? I'm the Nina who wants to mate with you." Nina shouted at the top of her lungs. "Mate?" Leah sneered. "Are you even worthy?" Chapter 167. Not long after Leah left, Sandy really carried a big pot of fish soup over. The smell of ginger could be smelled from afar. Elvis welcomed Sandy outside the cave and took the stone pot from her hands. He then invited, "Xiao Meng is inside. Do you want to accompany her?" This was the first time Elvis invited another female into his cave and he felt a little awkward. But for Gu Mengmeng, he would do anything he did not like. Sandy's heart was already on Gu Mengmeng and she did not have the time to feel proud of Elvis's invitation. She just nodded and walked in without standing on ceremony. The moment she entered the cave, Sandy saw Gu Mengmeng curled up in a corner. Her chubby little face puffed up and Sandy took a few steps forward to hug Gu Mengmeng in her arms. She imitated how she used to comfort herself when she was crying and patted her back lightly. Gu Mengmeng, I don't allow you to spoil yourself like this. Gu Mengmeng opened her red and swollen eyes and saw that the person who came was Sandy. She wanted to smile so that Sandy would not worry, but the corners of her lips were too heavy. No matter how much strength she used, she could not even pull out a curve. Sandy cupped Gu Mengmeng's little face with both hands and looked at Gu Mengmeng seriously. If you want to cry, don't force yourself to smile. I will accompany you. When you are done crying, we will eat something delicious. Bode's culinary skills have improved a lot recently, and the food he makes is getting better and better. He cooked water shuttles today, and I specially brought them for you to eat. Once you are full, you will not feel uncomfortable anymore. Gu Mengmeng shook her head and leaned into Sandy's arms. She wrapped her arms around Sandy's waist and choked with sobs. I have no appetite. This was the first sentence Gu Mengmeng said after returning from the lake. Her hoarse and weak voice made Sandy hug Gu Mengmeng over and over again in heartache. She said with a sullen face, You don't even want to eat delicious food. Looks like you are really feeling terrible. Elvis felt suffocated. Gu Mengmeng's pitiful look made him feel as if his heart was pierced by an icicle. Every time his heart beat, the flesh that was stuck to the icicle would tear a little. The pain seeped into his bones and he did not want to live. Sandy's attention was completely on Gu Mengmeng and she really did not have the mood to care about Elvis's life. She just hugged Gu Mengmeng and swayed her body gently, saying, Actually, it's not a big deal. No matter how outstanding Leah was, he was just a male. You're so beautiful. You'll definitely attract even more powerful males to pursue you at the beauty contest next spring. By then, we can choose someone better than Leah to piss him off. With that, Sandy suddenly tilted her head and looked at Elvis, before continuing, Isn't Elvis here? Take Elvis first and mate with him after your estrus period ends. Then, take Barit and Colin too. Take advantage of this winter to mate with them properly. It's best if you can get pregnant in winter, when the snow melts next year and Nina's stomach does not have any reaction. Do you think Leah will regret it to death? Gu Mengmeng smiled bitterly. She thought to herself that Leah chose Nina because she was unwilling to mate with him. If she was willing, Gu Mengmeng's heart suddenly lit up. She sat up abruptly and grabbed onto Sandy's arm, saying, Leah, I want to see Leah. Sandy was confused by Gu Mengmeng's sudden change. She could only turn her head blankly to look at Elvis with a questioning gaze. Elvis's lips curved upwards, but his brows were tightly furrowed. His eyes were filled with a depth that Gu Mengmeng could not understand or was unwilling to understand. He replied Gu Mengmeng with a single word of tenderness that could crush bones and blood. All right, aside from the topic, thank you to the Tycoon, Prideful Blood, and Water Dragon from QQ Reading for your 1999 plus 99 reading points. It was Jeaner's first time seeing such a huge reward. She took the screenshot and showed off in the authors group. Thank you, baby, for satisfying my little vanity. Then, this love breakup content won't take too long. It should be nearing the end. Babies, bear with it for a few more days. After I have comforted my Mengmeng, I will distribute meat to everyone. Please note to enter the group in advance. QQ group number 4927799273 My QQ is not a member, so the group I created could only accommodate 200 people. Now there are 100 plus. Chapter 168. Leah did not walk far and just hid at the edge of Elvis's territory. From this distance, he could barely hear Gu Mengmeng's voice and occasionally smell her scent in the air. He was caressing the beast-skin rope that Gu Mengmeng used to tie his hair. When he heard that Gu Mengmeng wanted to see him, he paused for a moment. Then he tried his best to control his urge to rush to her and climbed down the tree slowly. He stood at the edge of Elvis's territory and only stepped in after Elvis agreed to Gu Mengmeng's request. This was the first time he felt a sense of unfamiliarity and anticipation in this place that he had entered countless times. He did not know what Gu Mengmeng wanted to say to him, but to him now, it was good enough to hear her voice. According to the rules, Without Elvis's permission, he could not enter the cave. So Leah stood at the entrance of the cave and stared at the empty hole. He could clearly hear Elvis whispering to Gu Mengmeng, "He's here. I'll call him in." Gu Mengmeng held on to Elvis, her hands trembling uncontrollably. She was the one who had made up her mind to meet Leah. But when he really came, Gu Mengmeng started to feel guilty. What if she said she was willing to mate but Leah still chose Nina? If that happened, she would not even have the last chance to fantasize. Ha! Elvis could not understand Gu Mengmeng's thoughts and just looked at her with a frown. "Leah, you're here?" Gu Mengmeng held on to Elvis's arm tightly and did not let him go out or Leah enter. Gu Mengmeng mustered her courage to ask after looking at Sandy, who had been guarding at the side. "Yes, I'm here." Lee's voice was trembling slightly, but his face was still calm. No one knew how much effort he had put in to make him appear effortless to others. If I'm willing to mate with you, will you return to my side?" Gu Mengmeng's eyes were fixed on the entrance of the cave. Even though it was impossible for her to see Lee's expression and state, she was still staring at the entrance of the cave with her heart in her throat. She swore that she was not even this nervous on the day the results of the college entrance examinations were released. Leah remained silent. Gu Mengmeng was willing to mate with him. This news made him extremely happy, but it also made him feel twice as pressured, suffocating him. "Mengmeng." Lee's voice was low and hoarse. At this moment, when no one was looking, he kept his elegant smile for the first time. He furrowed his brows and replied solemnly, "I can die protecting you on the battlefield, but I don't want to see you suffer any harm before I die." Gu Mengmeng was taken aback. She did not understand what Leah meant. She instinctively looked at Elvis, only to realize that he was frowning in silence. She then turned to look at Sandy, but Sandy just patted her hand, gesturing for her to continue listening to Leah. Lee's hearing was very sensitive. He could clearly sense Gu Mengmeng's condition in the cave, so he paused for a while to give her sufficient time to think and calm down. After Gu Mengmeng's breathing and heartbeat had stabilized, Leah then continued, "The beast world is very dangerous. I can't protect you alone. If you care about me, please accept the rules of the beast world and build a strong family, so that I have family members that I can trust, and not have to worry about my partner getting hurt before I die or having no one to take care of him after I die." Aside from the topic, thank you to Shaoxiang Academy's baby, Mao061028, and Another Me for their 5-star reviews. And thank you to QQ Reading Baby, Faye to Hire, for her tip. As for the little baddies who commented that Leah was defiled by Nina a few days ago, so Leah is a scumbag, please face the wall. Chapter 169. No matter how dumb Gu Mengmeng was, she understood something by now. She let go of Elvis's arm, looked up at Elvis's eyes and asked, "A powerful family? A reliable family member? Who is it?" Leah was outside the cave and could not see Gu Mengmeng's actions. He could only hear from her voice that Gu Mengmeng's emotions were not quite right, but he still answered, "Elvis is the strongest male in Saint Nazaire. He had already advanced to a 3rd-level beast a long time ago, but he could not advance because he did not have the support of the mating contract. I believe as long as you mate with him, he will advance to the 4th level in no time. As long as he successfully advances." "Ha!" Gu Mengmeng laughed coldly, interrupting Lee's words. She seemed to have lost all her energy and sat down on her own legs weakly. She looked down at her own fingers and muttered, "So in your eyes, I am just a tool for you to advance." Lee's heart skipped a beat and he instantly understood what made him feel uneasy just now. His Gu Mengmeng had misunderstood him. Leah wanted to explain, but Gu Mengmeng beat him to it and said, "After I mate with Elvis, he will become extremely powerful. If he is so powerful that he can deal with all the dangers in the beast world that you mentioned, then it will be enough for me to have him alone. Why should I accept the rules of the beast world? If he is still not strong enough to deal with these dangers after mating with me. Ha, a family, how many partners do you need to have before it can be called a family? 3, 5, 10, 100? Gu Mengmeng took a deep breath and stood up abruptly, saying to the outside of the cave, "Leave." I don't want to see you anymore. Lee's body stiffened. He used all his strength but realized that he could not even control his fingertips. He lost Gu Mengmeng just like that? Wasn't it something that could be resolved by tolerating, waiting, coaxing, and letting her scold him for a while? In her heart, he was ultimately just like that. Leah wanted to rush in and explain to Gu Mengmeng. He had no time to care about the future, what was right or wrong, what was life or death. He just wanted to hug his Gu Mengmeng in his arms, watch her laugh, play with her and hear her call him Daddy Leah. Elvis appeared at the entrance of the cave and grabbed onto Lee's shoulder. His expression was solemn and gloomy. His voice was not loud, but it was unquestionable. She said she won't see you and asked you to leave. Leah grabbed Elvis's wrist and said, I want to see her. He turned around and retracted his hand. At the same time, his other hand was already strangling Lee's neck. Unless she is willing or I die. Leah was taken aback. After a while, he looked at Elvis with empty eyes and asked, That day during the duel, if I didn't admit defeat, would you really bite me to death, even at the cost of a leg? Elvis remained silent for a moment before nodding his head. Yes, I will. Leah frowned and asked, Have you ever thought about what would happen to Saint Nazir if I die and you become a crippled beast? Elvis remained silent for a long time. Then he raised his head and looked back at Ray's eyes with determination. I'm not as smart as you, I can't think of so many things at the same time. I only know that I cannot hand Meng Meng over to you. Leah was shocked and asked, Why? Elvis said in a faint voice, Do you still remember when you saved Xiao Meng from Quentin? Aside from the topic, thank you QQ Reading Baby, Pippi you, for your tips. Also, how much did the babies remember about Leah saving Gu Mengmeng from Quentin? Did anyone find anything wrong with this matter? Actually, I've been burying this topic since then. But I don't know if I buried it too deeply or you guys were so distracted by Lee's flirting that you didn't notice. Also, Elvis and Gu Mengmeng's mating had been brought forward. According to the standards, the mating process would definitely not pass, so you guys understand. Chapter 170. Leah nodded his head in confusion, indicating that he remembered. Elvis continued, With your abilities, you should have arrived at the scene a long time ago, right? Lee's heart skipped a beat as he vaguely understood what Elvis meant. Elvis did not expect Lee's reply and just continued. I heard from Xiao Meng that you descended from the sky when she was about to be choked to death by Quentin. You did not come as a bird. The fact that you descended from the sky meant that you had arrived a long time ago. But you did not appear and watched Quentin hurt Xiao Meng, right? Leah let go of the hand that he was competing with Elvis and staggered 2 steps backwards, not saying a word. Elvis did not force him to answer and just said calmly, You feel that you are not as important as the principles that she insists on in Xiao Meng's heart. But in your heart, isn't Xiao Meng also not as important as Saint Nazir? Back then, in order to teach her a lesson so that she would not dare to step out of Saint Nazir easily, you allowed Quentin to hurt her. In the battle with me, you also considered Saint Nazir's future, so you did not use your full strength. In the end, you even thought of a way to pretend to mate with Nina to make Xiao Meng sad. In your heart, other than her identity as the messenger of the beast deity and being able to bring a subversive power to Saint Nazir, what else does she have in your heart? Leah was speechless. As intelligent as he was, there was actually a day that he would be speechless after being questioned by Elvis. I cannot hand Xiao Meng over to someone who would compare her on a scale. Elvis took a step back and blocked the entrance of the cave steadily. Leah did not rush forward again and just lowered his head to look at his own shadow. He asked as if he was talking to himself, Have you told Meng Meng about this? Elvis shook his head and said, I don't want to say anything that will make Xiao Meng sad. Leah smiled bitterly and nodded his head. Yeah, with Elvis's character, how would he do something like bad-mouthing others behind their backs? Leah was very clear that his decision back then was rational and correct. In order to keep Gu Mengmeng in Saint Nazir, he had to first seal the news of her being the messenger of the beast deity within the tribe. The less contact she had with the outside world, the longer this news could be sealed. then the chances of Elvis and him fighting to mate with Gu Mengmeng and even allowing her to give birth to her first child during this period would be relatively higher. So he silently allowed Barit to let Gu Mengmeng out of Saint Nazir. He thought that, with his protection in the dark, everything would be under control. Or perhaps earlier on, he had already deduced all of this countless times. He never told anyone other than Elvis that Saint Nazir might get the messenger of the beast deity in the future. He allowed Nina to be unruly, willful, arrogant, and despotic. Even the title of the first beauty of Saint Nazir was given to Nina by him. So, when the messenger of the beast deity arrived, Nina, who was used to being arrogant and willful, would definitely cause trouble. And this was the opportunity he wanted. Of course, even without Nina, he would still train a female similar to Nina himself. Could be Sandy or it could be Maya. However, Nina's request saved him a lot of trouble, because those who had done this kind of thing once would be more adept at it. The truth proved that all of Lee's deductions were correct. Nina stirred up a conflict as he expected. Quentin laid his hands on females as he expected, and he played the role of a hero in the face of danger as he expected. But he did not expect that the messenger of the beast deity was Gu Mengmeng, a person who made his heart beat again. Aside from the topic, after receiving the notification from the editor, QQ Bookstore had arranged for the second round of PK. I did not even know if I passed the first round of PK. I, who received the notification directly, was also dumbfounded. The editor requested for a guarantee of 5 chapters during the 2P period. So, my babies, do you know what to do? Bookstore's collection point, and free recommendation tickets every day. Remember, it's every day. Please leave comments and gifts between today and Friday. Chapter 171. Gu Mengmeng used 7 days to recuperate. On the morning of the 8th day, the moment she opened her eyes, Gu Mengmeng forced herself to accept reality. Wasn't it just loving the wrong person? Crying for 7 days was already a good-for-nothing. It was not Gu Mengmeng's style to risk her life for a man who treated her as a tool. Clenching her teeth, Gu Mengmeng kept repeating in her heart, "I'm fine. I don't care. I can live a good life." Elvis noticed Gu Mengmeng's abnormality the moment he opened his eyes. This change was infinitely close to his ideal, but why was there a dull pain in his chest? Elvis hugged Gu Mengmeng's waist lightly and unknowingly pulled her into his arms again. He weighed her in his hands. She had slimmed down again. He frowned but did not know how to comfort her. "Elvis, can you bring me to the lake where we first met?" Gu Mengmeng opened her mouth. Elvis's expression froze and his brows formed a dead knot. He asked in a low voice, "Are you going to sink yourself to the bottom of the lake again?" Gu Mengmeng shook her head and smiled. "I won't be stupid for a man twice." Elvis looked at Gu Mengmeng doubtfully, not moving or saying a word. Gu Mengmeng saw that her credibility seemed to have been ruined by Elvis. She laughed at herself and said, "The last time I jumped into the lake, it was not to drown myself. I was just thinking that since I came from that lake, maybe I can go back from that lake." But reality proved that this idea was not reliable. That lake seemed to be a one-way entrance. To go back, I might have to find another exit. "Go back." Elvis repeated Gu Mengmeng's words in a low voice, but he only said one word before he felt as if someone was strangling his throat. Not to mention repeating Gu Mengmeng's words. Even his breathing was not smooth. Gu Mengmeng was trying her best to pull herself out from her heartbroken emotions. She had already used up a lot of energy to stop herself from crying. She really did not have the mood to figure out Elvis's current thoughts. Gu Mengmeng looked down and twisted her fingers nonchalantly. "Since I can't go back for now, I have to think of a way to live more comfortably. Roasting fish and meat every day is not a solution. Even if I don't get sick of it, my body can't take it." Elvis recalled that the lake was very special because he met Gu Mengmeng there. But other than that, Elvis really could not think of anything else in the lake. Gu Mengmeng could not help but find it funny when she saw Elvis thinking so hard. This kind of brainstorming work was really not suitable for him. Every time he was thinking about a problem, his brows would furrow into a dead knot. Gu Mengmeng placed her little hand on Elvis's brows and said patiently, I need to ingest salt to maintain my health. In the past few days, I had been feeling weak, which was a sign of a lack of salt. If I don't take in more salt, my condition will worsen, and I won't be able to survive this winter. Elvis immediately tensed up upon hearing that. Gu Meng patted Elvis's shoulder and gestured for him to relax. Then, she said, when I jumped into the lake previously, I accidentally realized that the lake water was salty. I suspect that it was a salt lake. Bring me there to take a look. If that's really the case, then I can be saved. Elvis still had a lingering fear towards Gu Mengmeng's sudden jump into the lake and the words she said to him before jumping into the lake. Elvis did not dare to take the risk of bringing her closer to that place, especially after knowing that it could be a passage for her to return to the other world. He could not let her near that place. So Elvis asked cautiously, "What does salt look like? Tell me, I'll go get it for you." Aside from the topic, trying to act pitiful, Susu had caught a cold. To someone who did not have a stockpile of chapters, the sudden notification of adding chapters was a huge blow. But for the sake of our Gu Mingming's better development, Susu had been pouring cup after cup of coffee into her stomach, trying her best to stay awake so that she could write more chapters for her babies. For the sake of my hard work, can you please give me your recommendation tickets every day? Chapter 172. Gu Mengmeng raised her brows and looked at Elvis, asking, "Why? Are you planning to imprison me and not let me leave this cave for the rest of my life?" Elvis was taken aback by Gu Mengmeng's words and shook his head instinctively. Gu Mengmeng then smiled. "Then it's settled. I promise I won't jump into the lake this time. I didn't have the experience last time and didn't know the water was so cold. If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have had the guts to jump in." That was the truth. The water was still warm when Gu Mengmeng came, but after a few days it had become extremely cold. It could be seen that winter was indeed coming, and there seemed to be no transition period. Elvis could not reject Gu Mengmeng in the end, but he was much more cautious this time. He carried Gu Mengmeng in his arms and did not let her leave his side. Gu Mengmeng was also happy to be at ease. Without shoes, the ground was cold and hard, and moreover, she really did not want to jump into the lake. Being hugged by Elvis to keep her warm was pretty good. When they reached the lakeside again, Gu Mengmeng's eyes lit up immediately. This was her third time here. Why did she not realize that this was a salt lake the previous 2 times? Large pieces of salt crystals were hanging on the rock wall by the lakeside, but she did not realize it previously. Gu Mengmeng was extremely excited, pointing at a piece nearer to her. "Elvis, hurry. Go there. I want that white one." Seeing that Gu Mengmeng was interested in things other than Leah, Elvis felt slightly more at ease. Looking at the direction Gu Mengmeng was pointing at, he nodded his head, carrying Gu Mengmeng, and stepped on the huge rocks by the lakeside. With a few leaps, he reached the rock wall. He held onto Gu Mengmeng with one hand and held onto the protruding part of the rock wall with the other, hanging steadily in midair. Gu Mengmeng broke off a small piece of salt crystal and licked it with her little tongue. A huge smile bloomed on Gu Mengmeng's face. That's right. It was what she wanted. Gu Mengmeng danced with joy, using all her strength to break off a large piece and hugged it in her arms. She wanted to take more, but her hands could only hold too little now. If she used too much strength, there would be nothing left after the salt crystal was crushed. Looking at Gu Mengmeng's face that was wrinkled like a bun, Elvis asked in confusion, "What's wrong? Is it not what you want?" Gu Mengmeng shook her head and said, "This is what I want, but I can only take this much." Elvis looked at the large piece of what she called salt in her hands. It was about the size of a rabbit if it was cooked. It was indeed a little too little. It was rare that Gu Mengmeng was in the mood and had an appetite, so Elvis naturally would not disappoint her. He said, "It's all right. Let's take these back first. I'll help you get them later." Gu Mengmeng shook her head and said, "It's quite a long journey from here. Let's get enough in one go so that we don't have to run back and forth." Elvis nodded. To him, whatever Gu Mengmeng said was right, so he said, "Then break off a few more and throw them on the shore." I will take them later. Gu Mengming's lips twitched. Throw it to the shore? If that happened, it would be smashed into pieces. If it got wet, it would be impossible to pick it up even if he wanted to. Sigh. He knew that he was here to look for salt. But why didn't he think of bringing a piece of animal skin with him when he left? I'm so stupid. Beast skin? Elvis's eyes lit up and he said to Gu Mengming, Beast skin. I brought it. Aside from the topic, hoeing the crops in the middle of the afternoon, stockpiling the manuscript today. The sun sets on the mountain in the morning, stockpiling the manuscript today. Bright moonlight in front of my bed, stockpiling the manuscript today. Not knowing where the human face has gone, I must stockpile the manuscript today. An ancient poem that did not rhyme at all proved that the author had gone crazy. Chapter 173. Gu Mengming blinked her big innocent eyes at Elvis, sizing him up from head to toe. Damn it. He did not have anything on him other than that beast skin dress. Did he bring beast skin? Where did he hide it? Wait a minute. A bomb exploded in Gu Mengming's mind. Then she looked at Elvis's beast skin dress with a stiff face. F*******. Leader, you can't be so hardcore, right? Damn it. I'm bringing this salt back to eat. But you want me to use your beast skin dress that does not contain any additives to wrap a certain important part of my body? How can I eat it when I go back to cook? Gu Mengming shook her head like a rattle drum. No, I can't use your beast skin dress. I will be traumatized by the salt. Elvis smiled dotingly. It's all right, after we get the salt. I'll turn into my original form and carry you back. I won't let anyone see my body. Gu Mengming was speechless, holding her forehead. That's not the problem, all right? Elvis did not understand. Frowning slightly. Gu Mengming hugged the salt too tightly. Some of it had already crumbled in her hands. Gu Mengming looked at the crumbled salt in her hands and hurriedly said, Let's go down first. I'll think of another way. Without a word, Elvis kicked off with force and jumped up like he was stepping on a spring bed. After a few consecutive jumps, he landed steadily at a distance of 1 meter away from the lake. He placed Gu Mengming down carefully and held onto her shoulders, saying, Wait for me here. I'll help you get some more. Gu Mengming's body trembled as she looked at Elvis. Wait for me here. I'll go get more for you. Gu Mengming nodded. She was very clear that with her small body, she would only be a burden if she went over, so she might as well let Elvis handle it. Elvis held onto Gu Mengming's shoulders tighter, staring into her eyes. Promise me. Don't go near the lake. Gu Mengming knew that Elvis was scared by her previously, so she smiled. Don't worry. I treasure my life more than anyone else. I don't have any inclination to commit suicide or harm myself. Elvis was still not at ease, but this was the first time Gu Mengming was interested in something in the past few days. He could see that she was trying her best to divert her attention with other things, so that she would not have time to think about Leah. As long as she could not be sad, he was willing to do all the things for her. As Elvis walked towards the cliff by the lake, he kept an eye on Gu Mengming's movements. Seeing that she only plucked a few big leaves strenuously at the side and then started to wrap the salt carefully, he then leaped up the cliff with a peace of mind. Not long after, Elvis had already made more than 10 trips. Gu Mengming looked at the small mountain of salt crystals in front of her and smiled from the bottom of her heart for the first time in a few days. Together with Elvis, she used leaves to wrap the salt, then tied them up with thinner vines and hung them around Elvis's neck like he was wearing a scarf. Elvis hung a bag of salt around his neck and carried a smaller Gu Mengming in his arms. It felt like a boss of a grocery store bringing his daughter home to buy groceries. Gu Mengming could not help but laugh at this thought. She weighed the sizable amount of salt in her hands and suddenly felt like she was a nouveau riche who suddenly had a huge sum of money. Elvis did not know what these white crystals were used for, but looking at Gu Mengming's smile, he felt that these crystals were really precious. He wanted to collect all the crystals by the lake for her. As long as she could smile like this, it would be enough. Aside from the topic, I saw that some little babies left messages saying that their messages had been deleted. Susu was really innocent in this matter. As a child raised by a stepmother who did not even have a backer in the bookstore, the messages she posted in the QQ group had been deleted a few times. Chapter 174. Elvis called Sandy over to accompany Gu Mengmeng while he returned to the lakeside, wanting to help Gu Mengmeng get more salt crystals. But sometimes, when Elvis appeared in front of Gu Mengmeng with his head hung low like a child who had done something wrong, Gu Mengmeng deeply experienced for the first time in her life what was called a pig teammate. Looking at Elvis's dejected look, Gu Mengmeng felt like laughing for some reason. She really wanted to ask, "Elvis, are you actually a pig in wolf skin? Xiaomeng, don't be angry. I know where to find the salt crystals you want. Although it's a little far, I can definitely bring a lot of them back for you." Gu Mengmeng waved her hands and said, "Tell me first, how many salt crystals did you get into the water from the lakeside?" Elvis cleared his throat and used his hands to form a shape about the size of a rice bowl. He then turned his head away, not daring to look at Gu Mengmeng in the eyes. Gu Mengmeng's lips curled to one side. This Elvis was really not good at lying. If it was just this little bit, why would he be so nervous? Gu Mengmeng did not expose him, nor did she reply. She just crossed her arms in front of her chest and looked at Elvis with her chin raised. Then, she saw Elvis quietly expand the area between his hands. From the size of a bowl, it became the size of a wash basin. He then kept glancing at Gu Mengmeng from the corner of his eyes. He looked like a husky that had torn down a house. Gu Mengmeng facepalmed. She no longer doubted that huskies and wolves were close relatives. Gu Mengmeng patted Elvis's shoulder and said, "You have successfully lowered the overall intelligence level of the wolf tribe. If you meet other wolves in the future, hide a little. I'm afraid they will want to bite you to death." Elvis did not really understand Gu Mengmeng's words. After all, he had never seen a wolf tribe that could defeat him. But he would just treat it as a word of concern. Elvis thought about it and chuckled. He then asked in a probing manner, "About the salt crystals? You're not angry?" Gu Mengmeng shook her head and said, "I think the salt crystals there are enough to last our entire tribe for 2 to 3 years. It won't affect you much if you get rid of them. Moreover, even if there aren't any salt crystals, I have a way to extract them from the lake. It's just that using ready-made salt crystals would save me a lot of trouble." Elvis then heaved a sigh of relief and understood why Gu Mengmeng insisted on going over by herself in the morning. Elvis's ears twitched as he heard someone coming from the cave. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Looking at Gu Mengmeng, Elvis said, "Then you and Sandy can play first. I will go out for a while and be back soon." Gu Mengmeng did not take it to heart. After all, Elvis was the leader of the tribe. He could not possibly revolve around her every day, right? She nodded and continued to help Sandy spread the salt evenly on the fish that Bode had prepared. Then they strung the fish with vines one by one. 10 fish were strung on one vine and placed at the side. Because the fish were too fat, it was impossible for the 2 females to lift them up. Elvis walked out of the cave and saw that it was indeed Leah. "She's much better today." Elvis did not raise any questions and just stated it directly. Lee's expression was indifferent. Even though he tried very hard to maintain his usual smile, his sunken eye sockets and haggard face revealed his torment. With regards to the messenger of the beast deity, all his plans were correct, but there was a very important premise, and that was that he must never truly fall in love with this messenger of the beast deity. But this important premise had already been shattered by Gu Mengmeng's daddy Leah when he was defenseless. Aside from the topic, regarding the issue of giving Gu Mengmeng a cheat, sometimes I really don't know what everyone's standards are. My setting is that Gu Mengmeng is an ordinary first-year female student who accidentally transmigrated. So in the novel, I tried my best to avoid using an unrealistic cheat, referring to the early stages. But there were still people who told me that Gu Mengmeng's protagonist aura was too strong, as if she did not need to learn anything. And there were also some readers who told me that Gu Mengmeng was too weak. Why did she not use the cheat? Alright, what I want to say is that I will definitely activate my Goldfinger, but I won't activate it for no reason. Let me reveal a small clue. The activation of the cheat is related to mating. Then, it's almost time for mating, probably. Who knows how many more days? Chapter 175. Leah did not reply, he just passed the bag of leaves tied by a bunch of vines to Elvis, then passed a lot of dried ginger to Elvis, saying, "She always likes some strange things, things that no one would pick up even if they were thrown on the ground, but she always treats them like treasures." Elvis took over the things from Lee's hands, placed it next to his nose and sniffed it. Then he knew that the bag of leaves contained salt crystals. Looking at the method of wrapping it, it was clearly the same as Gu Mengmeng's. That meant that when they went to the lake to retrieve the salt crystals in the morning, Leah was also there, but he did not realize it. Elvis could now understand what Leah meant when he said, "The beast world is so dangerous. A male cannot protect Gu Mengmeng. If the one following him today was not Leah, but someone else, then..." Elvis did not voice out his worries, he just asked, "Should I tell her? Did you send it over?" Leah shook his head, smiling bitterly. "Based on her character, if she knew that I brought it over, I'm afraid she would not accept it." Elvis was silent, he could not deny it. Leah understood Gu Mengmeng much more thoroughly than him. Most of the time, he did not know what Gu Mengmeng was thinking about. He could only do as she said, but Leah could see through her thoughts before she opened her mouth. Perhaps this was the reason why he lost to Leah in Xiaomeng's heart. Elvis nodded, agreeing to it, then carried the things and turned to enter the cave. Leah raised his hand, wanting to stop Elvis, but when the words were at the tip of his tongue, he realized that he did not have the right to instruct him. Looking at his blood-stained and dirty fingers from digging the yellow roots all over the mountain, Leah smiled bitterly, turning to walk back into the mountain. As long as she was happy, so what if he dug his hands till they were mush? Elvis returned to the cave, piling the things that Leah brought over at the side, together with the salt crystal bags they brought back in the morning. Then, he sat beside Gu Mengmeng, watching her and Sandy string up the fishes while chatting and laughing. Bode had brought a total of over 30 fishes, and they were all cleaned, so it was not too strenuous to string them up. After Gu Mengmeng settled everything, she patted Elvis's arm and asked, "In your territory, would there be wild animals that would steal our food?" Elvis shook his head. "The pressure of the orcs is enough to intimidate normal wild animals. They would not dare to go near the tribe." Gu Mengmeng nodded, then asked again, "Would there be other orcs that would steal of our food?" Elvis was taken aback for a moment. Then he smiled and rubbed Gu Mengmeng's furry little head. "The males of Saint Nazir will not snatch the food of their own females. As for the males from other clans, unless they destroy the entire Saint Nazir, they should not be able to enter this cave to take your water shuttle." Don't worry. Nobody knew what Gu Mengmeng was doing. Sandy helped out for half a day, only thinking that it was a new game that Gu Mengmeng had invented. After all, in this boring era, Sandy was tired of throwing a stone and picking it up after playing it for a few years. Compared to those, this game of stringing up the water shuttles was already considered much more fun. Digression. Chapter 176. How long will this take? Sandy tilted her head and asked. Gu Mengmeng smacked her lips and said, "I don't know either. It depends on the air-drying situation." Sandy did not know what air-drying situation was, but it looked like it would take a long time, so she did not have the desire to continue waiting. She pulled Gu Mengmeng and said, "Our water shuttles are all used up. Why don't we ask Bode and the rest to get some more, and we can continue to wear them?" Gu Mengmeng shook her head and rejected Sandy's suggestion. She pointed at the 30 big fishes hanging on the tree and said, "Although this is delicious, we can't just eat it for the entire winter." Sandy was stunned and her clear big eyes were instantly filled with the colors of a fangirl. Her saliva was about to drip down uncontrollably. She pulled Gu Mengmeng's arm and pointed at the fish on the tree excitedly, asking, "Edible? Edible?" Gu Mengmeng smiled and nodded. "Yeah, this will not go bad easily after being dried in the shade. Before winter, ask Bode to take 2 skewers and leave 1 for me. It's quite enjoyable to eat fish occasionally during winter." Elvis's expression was rather solemn. He took a step forward and held onto Gu Mengmeng's shoulders. Accommodating her height, he looked into her eyes and asked, "As long as we hang it like this, the food won't go bad?" Gu Mengmeng smiled and said, "Of course not. It has to be marinated with salt first and then dried in the shade. Although it's not as effective as preservatives, but if it's like what you said, when the snow seals the mountain during winter and we can't even leave the cave, then it's like a natural refrigerator. If we handle it this way, it shouldn't be a problem to store it for the entire winter. Elvis was overjoyed. He carried Gu Meng Meng and howled at the sky. Gu Meng Meng did not know what message he was sending. She only knew that after a while, all the males in the tribe gathered in front of Elvis's cave and looked at Gu Meng Meng with sparkling eyes. Xiao Meng, what kind of food can be stored using this method? Can you tell everyone? Elvis carried Gu Meng Meng so that she would not be drowned in the crowd of tall males. And males had very sensitive ears. Even if Gu Meng Meng's voice was not as loud as Elvis's, they could still hear her clearly. Ever since Gu Meng Meng broke up with her boyfriend, she had almost never shown her face in front of the public. This long-lost public gaze still made her feel a little awkward. She instinctively hid in Elvis's arms and revealed half of her face, saying, "Any normal food is fine, but I have never pickled those tigers and leopards that you guys usually eat. I'm not sure, but in theory it should be fine." Elvis shook his head and said, "I'm not sure, but in theory it should be fine." The moment Gu Meng Meng finished speaking, a deafening cheer erupted from the beast horde. No matter how many times she had heard it, the sight of hundreds of beasts roaring at the sky still gave Gu Meng Meng a fright. Shrinking into Elvis's arms, Gu Meng Meng was like a frightened kitten. She was protected gently by Elvis as he patted her back slowly. After the males roared, they scattered in all directions to search for food that they could use. At this moment, a familiar person walked in front of Gu Meng Meng slowly. He smiled bashfully and raised his hand, saying, "Long time no see, Gu Meng Meng." Gu Meng Meng then noticed Barit. The last time she saw him was at the platform of the deity's punishment. Chapter 177. Barit clenched his fists and arched his arms, his firm muscles bulging. He displayed his masculine image perfectly, just like a walking hormone. Gu Meng Meng nodded and said, "Looks good. Then I'm relieved. Hurry and go look for prey with the rest. If you're late, they'll snatch it all away." Barit was not in a hurry. He stood at the same spot and asked Gu Meng Meng, "You saved me on the platform of the deity's punishment. To repay you, I'll be responsible for your food this winter. What do you like to eat? Tell me, I'll prepare it for you." This matter, it was Li's suggestion, and at that time she had not lost Leah yet. Gu Meng Meng could not maintain the smile on her face and her nose felt sour. Gu Meng Meng despised herself for being so useless in her heart. She rubbed her nose and pretended to think, lifting her little face. She rolled her eyes to get rid of the mist in her eyes and forced herself to smile and answer, "Actually, there's no need. You helped me and I helped you, so we're even now. Elvis will help me prepare my food. You just have to take care of yourself." Barit looked at Elvis, his gaze filled with sincerity and determination, saying, "Elvis, please let me enter your cave this winter." Elvis frowned and remained silent for a moment before saying, "I'll prepare sufficient food for Xiao Meng, and she won't agree to it." Barit looked at Gu Meng Meng, then back at Elvis, saying, "Leader, please allow me to enter your cave this winter." Elvis frowned and squinted his eyes at Barit, saying, "Are you reminding me not to forget myself and my identity?" Barit remained silent, neither admitting nor denying it. Elvis's lips curled up and he tilted his neck to both sides, looking like he was warming up. Gu Meng Meng completely did not understand what they were talking about, but the smell of gunpowder was too strong. No matter how slow she was, it was impossible for her not to sense it. Barit had just come down from the platform of the deity's punishment a few days ago. A 3-day trip outside the gates of hell was not a joke. Elvis also injured his leg for some reason previously. Why were the two disabled patients still so angry? Gu Meng Meng patted Elvis's shoulder, attracting his attention to her. She then smiled lightly, saying, "Can you bring me around? I don't want to eat meat all winter. I'll get sick of it." Elvis glanced at Barit from the corner of his eyes and did not say anything, only nodding his head. Gu Meng Meng then turned to Barit and said, "In the past, I didn't understand the rules of the beast world and thought that this place was the same as our world, where men and women could be friends. But now I knew that apart from mating, it was impossible for a male and a female to coexist. I don't want to find a partner here, so don't waste your time on me. Go prepare your own food and don't come looking for me again. After Gu Mengmeng finished speaking, she wrapped her arms around Elvis's neck, signaling him to leave. Elvis did not stay for a second longer as he carried Gu Mengmeng out of the tribe. Barit was not dejected by Gu Mengmeng's words. He knew about Li's situation. Although he could not understand Gu Mengmeng's view on love, he would not try to change it. He was different from Leah. Mating with Gu Mengmeng was his dream, but he did not dare to hope that it would come true. As long as he could protect her from afar and help her with some trivial matters, he would be satisfied. So, he maintained a certain distance and followed behind Elvis silently. There was no disappointment, no hesitation, no doubt, only a determined gaze and a primitive instinct to be loyal to himself. Aside from the topic. Chapter 178. Elvis knew that Barit was following behind him, but he did not expose or stop him. It was always better to have one more person protecting Gu Mengmeng. If she met with an extremely serious danger, it would be so lucky to have a reliable person to bring Gu Mengmeng away when she was fighting for her life. Gu Mengmeng did not have sharp senses like Elvis, so she just nestled in Elvis's arms and looked around. Sometimes, she asked Elvis to head east, and at other times, she wandered around aimlessly. Elvis did not feel annoyed, and let her run around the mountain freely. Actually, there seemed to be quite a lot of edible things here, but Gu Mengmeng did not know much, so she did not dare to try. Until she found a familiar sea of flowers. Potato blossoms. Who said that watching Korean dramas was useless? Ah! Gu Mengmeng had seen this kind of flower in a Korean drama, The Best Love, a long time ago. It was probably because the female lead promised to make curry for the male lead, but she forgot why she did not come. The potato that the male lead bought had already sprouted, and in the end only a long green bud grew out, but it did not bloom. Until one day, the male lead saw a painting of a potato field, and the field was filled with such buds. An old man told the male lead that potatoes looked like this when they bloomed. The male lead suddenly realized that the potato in his house had bloomed long ago, and then he ran off to look for the female lead in a melodramatic manner, but he could not remember it clearly. Gu Mengmeng only remembered complaining to her roommates about this point. Who the hell would hang a painting of a potato field as a decoration? It was also because this point was too shocking, so she remembered this scene especially clearly. It was just that Gu Mengmeng, who was hugging a watermelon and lying on the sofa to watch dramas, really did not expect that this point would actually improve her meals one day in the future. Gu Mengmeng patted Elvis's shoulder excitedly. That. With the previous experience with the salt crystals, Elvis was very careful this time. He did not know what Gu Mengmeng wanted these grasses for, but his usual principle was, don't ask, just do it. So Elvis carefully walked to the middle of the potato blossoms, then asked, can I just bring these grasses back? Can I just pluck them out? Gu Mengmeng stretched out her index finger and shook it in front of Elvis like a pendulum. She made a no expression and said, I don't want this grass. I want the thing underneath it. Elvis gently pushed the grass aside and realized that there was only soil underneath. What did Gu Mengmeng want the soil for? Could it be that dirt could be eaten? Gu Mengmeng patted Elvis's arm, gesturing for him to put her down. Elvis did as she was told. Gu Mengmeng rolled up her sleeves and separated her legs to shoulder width. She held onto a potato pudding with both hands and pulled it up with all her might. *CK me. The skin on his hand was torn. So painful. Gu Mengmeng looked at Elvis with her bloodshot hands, tears welling up in her eyes due to the pain in her palms. Her pitiful look melted Elvis's heart. He pulled Gu Mengmeng into his arms and looked at the wound on her palms. The wound was not deep, but to Elvis, it was a ghastly sight. Elvis held Gu Mengmeng's little hand gently and brought it to his lips. Then, He actually stuck out his tongue and started to lick Gu Mengming's palm carefully. A wave of numbness spread from Gu Mengming's palm to every corner of her body. Gu Mengming stared in bewilderment and stuttered, What are you doing?" Aside from the topic, thank you QQ Reader Dream for your tips and concern. I will take care of my body. The all-purpose plain water was already prepared and he was drinking it every day. Chapter 179. Elvis did not answer Gu Mengming's question and just focused on licking her little hand. Until he licked every single scar clean. He then placed her little hand by his lips reluctantly and kissed it. Only then did he answer, "This way, the wounds won't get inflamed and will heal faster." Gu Mengming's eyes widened. Gu Mengming's face was flushed red and she could not say a word. Previously, Leah had also licked the blood from her nose, but as the distance was too close, she could not see anything clearly and the entire process was transmitted through her skin. But it was different this time. When Elvis was licking her little hand, she maintained a VVIP 3D perspective and watched as Elvis's tongue licked her little hand over and over again as if she was watching a live broadcast. Who could understand the feeling of touching an electric switch for 5 minutes? Elvis looked at Gu Mengming's flushed face and recalled the scene when Leah hugged her in the stream. That day, he watched everything quietly from afar and tried his best to control himself from rushing over. Today, he finally had such a chance to taste her wonderful taste. Although they did not have a proper title, she could only rely on him, trust him, and let him take care of her. This was enough happiness. Elvis kissed Gu Mengming's little face and then placed her down on a smooth big rock for her to sit properly. Then, he pointed at the grass that Gu Mengming wanted to pluck, but did not manage to. "Just pluck it up?" Gu Mengming nodded her head blankly. She had not recovered from Elvis's actions just now. Now, as long as Elvis looked at her, she would feel her face burning and she did not know where to place her hands. Elvis liked Gu Mengming's childish look. Did it mean that she finally saw him as an ordinary male when she was shy because of his actions? Elvis was in a good mood and could do his work with ease. He grabbed the handful of grass and pulled out a bunch of potatoes that were buried underground without much effort. Elvis looked at the string of black and swarthy things in shock. He placed it at the tip of his nose and sniffed it. It smelled like dirt. Puzzled, he brought the string of things in front of Gu Mengming and asked, "The thing below you mentioned, is this?" Gu Mengming was still in a daze until Elvis patted her head lightly. She then snapped back to reality. Ah, yes, that's it. This is called potato. It's a divine dish that goes with everything. It's delicious and can help with hunger. Most importantly, it's easy to store. You can just pile it up in the cave and it won't go bad easily. Elvis looked at the fist-sized fruits skeptically. He casually plucked one off and threw it into his mouth without even washing it. He chewed on it with a few crunching sounds. Along with Elvis's twisted expression, Gu Mengming's laughter reverberated throughout the entire sea of flowers. "Ha ha ha! Hurry up and show your true form. You're a husky, aren't you? How can a wolf be as stupid as you? Ha ha ha! I'm dying of laughter." Gu Mengming clutched her stomach and rolled around in laughter. Seeing her rare smile, Elvis suddenly felt that the strange taste in his mouth was not so unbearable anymore. Chapter 180. When Gu Mengming was done laughing, she pushed herself up with both hands and jumped down from the huge rock. Before her feet touched the ground, Elvis caught her and held her in his arms firmly. "The ground is cold. Be careful." Gu Mengming's heart warmed and she responded with a, "Yeah." She took the potatoes from Elvis's hands and only realized when she placed them in her hands. Was this really a potato? It was almost as big as a dragon fruit. Weighing it in her hands, this potato was at least 1 caddy. Then the string of potatoes in Elvis's hands. Damn. She was rich. As long as she plucked this patch of potatoes, it would be enough for the entire Saint Nazaire tribe to eat for a year. Of course, Gu Mengming neglected a very important problem. Many males in Saint Nazaire, like Elvis, were carnivorous beasts. Potatoes were really not attractive to them. Of course, if it was to perform for the females, they could even eat one caddy of soil, let alone potatoes. But to be used as food, it was not a good choice. But Gu Mengmeng did not think about these things at the moment. She was immersed in her own fantasy world. Potato shreds, potato strips, braised potatoes, potato stew with beef. No, she did not see a cow after coming here. Then potato stew with tiger? It was quite scary just thinking about it. A tiger's head was placed in the middle of a pot of potatoes. Damn, the tiger was looking at her. No matter how she thought about it, she looked more like the food. No, it was too heavy taste. Indeed, she could not get used to it. Elvis watched Gu Mengming's expression change every now and then. He could not help but recall the first time he met her. She was also like this. He did not know what she was thinking, but that weird expression made him want to smile. Hugging and kissing Gu Mengming, Elvis asked, "What are you thinking about? Tell me about it." Gu Mengming shrugged her shoulders and said, "I was thinking, how are we going to bring these potatoes back?" Elvis tilted his head slightly and said, "Someone helped us. We will take as much as you want." Gu Mengming tilted her head with a face full of question marks. Elvis called out to the people behind him in a low voice, and a few figures popped out from the forest far away. They quickly arrived in front of Gu Mengming and Elvis. Gu Mengming took a look. They were all familiar faces. Barit, Colin, Oakley? Why are you guys here? Gu Mengming asked with a smile. Colin scratched his head innocently and said, "I saw Barit following you out of the tribe. I thought you might need help, so I followed." Oakley took half a step forward and smiled at Gu Mengming. "I haven't seen you for a few days. I was afraid that you would forget about me if I didn't come out any longer, so I followed you here." Gu Mengming nodded. Barit did not say a word and just stood there quietly, his gaze never leaving Gu Mengming. Gu Mengming shook her head with a smile and said helplessly, "Since you're already here, why are you sneaking around? Can't you just come out and say hello?" Oakley pointed at Colin and said, "He pulled me and didn't let me come out." Colin immediately pointed at Barit and said, "I wanted to come out at first, but Barit stopped me. He said that you would not be happy to see us." With that, Colin turned his head to look at Barit and said, "Why are you lying?" Gu Mengming was clearly not unhappy. Barit was speechless. He sighed helplessly and said, "How many of these grasses do you want to pluck? I'll help you." Gu Mengming chuckled and said, "Pluck as many as you can. These are our rations for the winter." Aside from the topic. Chapter 181. Once they heard that it was Gu Mengming's food, how could the males not work hard? Barit, Colin, and Oakley had pulled out at least 200 caddies of potatoes. Gu Mengming did not know if it was enough for the entire tribe to eat, but even if she ate potatoes for 3 meals in the entire winter, she reckoned that she would not be able to finish them by next spring. But even so, Elvis still felt that it was too little, so he handed Gu Mengming over to Oakley and plucked more himself. Gu Mengming looked at the huge string of potatoes, which she estimated to be at least 250 caddies, and felt deeply ashamed. Damn, the power output was indeed not on the same level. The barbells she lifted in the gym previously were all wasted training. So many fighting moves could only be used to bully a coward like Nina. In the end, Colin transformed back to his original form and hung the 200 caddies of potatoes on his body. He did not feel that it was heavy, but it was a little cramped when he walked, as he was afraid that Gu Mengming's food would fall onto the ground. So the scene of this 2-story tall black bear carrying the potatoes carefully and taking small steps was even more comical than a circus performance. Gu Mengming could not help but laugh out loud, causing Colin to look back, and a potato fell from his head. Barit caught the potato quickly and threw it towards Colin. Colin instinctively opened his mouth to catch it and chewed on it. This time, Gu Mengming laughed even harder, rocking back and forth in Elvis's arms. She said breathlessly, "Ha ha ha, Elvis! Is this called a crooked stick has a crooked shadow? With you leading the way, will the entire tribe eat raw potatoes like you? Ha ha ha." Elvis actually wanted to explain that firstly, they had never eaten this before. Secondly, before they met Gu Mengming, they had always eaten raw food, but strangely, Colin's reaction after eating the raw potatoes was different from Elvis. He smacked his lips, as if he wanted more. But thinking that it was Gu Mingming's food, he held back and did not eat another one. When the group returned to St. Nazaire, it was already afternoon. They returned to Elvis's territory in a noisy manner, and Barit and the other two consciously stopped at the outskirts of the territory. Gu Mengmeng smiled and waved. "What are you waiting for? Come in." The three of them then nodded and followed Gu Mengmeng into Elvis's territory. However, before he reached the entrance of the cave, he heard loud noises. Gu Mengmeng frowned and looked towards the source of the sound. She saw two females fighting each other. One of them seemed to be Sandy and the other, Nina, F***CK. Are they bullying me at my doorstep? It just so happens that I have nowhere to vent my anger. Gu Mengmeng jumped down from Elvis's arms and ran straight towards Sandy and Nina. Nina had suffered so many losses in Gu Mengmeng's hands. Seeing Gu Mengmeng charging over in such a manner, she was so frightened that she immediately let go of Sandy and jumped back. She reached out a hand to block Gu Mengmeng. You can't bully me just because you have more people." Gu Mengmeng laughed coldly. "Didn't you send yourself here to be bullied by me?" Nina raised her head and said in what she thought was a noble manner, "That's not it. I'm here to look for my mail." Gu Mengmeng smiled embarrassedly. "You're here to look for your mail? Is your mail Elvis?" Aside from the topic, I know everyone hates Nina and I hate her too, but she could not die for now. She still had to court death. Chapter 182. My mail is not Elvis, it's Leah. Nina raised her head even higher and looked at Gu Mengmeng with a provocative gaze, as if she was the victor. Actually, Nina's gaze was not considered provocative because her eyes were too small and Gu Mengmeng could not see through her gaze at all. But at this moment, no matter what her gaze was, it looked like a provocation. Gu Mengmeng felt a sharp pain in her heart when she heard that. One slash to the throat, fast, accurate and ruthless. Gu Mengmeng clenched her teeth and looked at Nina coldly. "I wanted to hit you the previous time but Leah stopped me. Now that you've sent yourself to me, let's settle our old and new debts together." With that, Gu Mengmeng pounced towards Nina. Nina shouted at the top of her lungs while dodging. "Leah, where are you? Come out and take a look. This is Gu Mengmeng's real face. She is chasing after your female and hitting her. Come and save me." The more Nina shouted, the redder Gu Mengmeng's eyes became. Look all you want. Did she still care what a man who treated her as a tool would think of her? Gu Mengmeng feinted and dodged left and right, successfully blocking Nina, who was in a panic. She leaped up and rode on Nina's body, slapping her left and right continuously. Gu Mengmeng slapped her more than 10 times until her hand hurt, but she still refused to stop. Just as the slap that was raised high up was about to land again, Gu Mengmeng's wrist was clamped down by a force. Gu Mengmeng looked towards the direction of that force, and her entire head of silver hair stung her eyes. Gu Mengmeng laughed coldly and turned her head to the other side. She looked at Elvis, who had already arrived beside her and was grabbing onto Lee's wrist. Trespassing into someone else's territory without permission. How should we deal with it? Elvis did not use too much strength to hold onto Lee's hand, but the strong pressure emitted from his body was already a clear warning. Elvis's voice was cold and without a trace of warmth. He said, "Let go." Leah acted as if he did not hear Elvis's warning as he stared straight at Gu Mengmeng with his long and narrow eyes. His thin lips opened slightly and he replied slowly, "Trespassing into someone else's territory without permission should be treated as an intruder and chased away. If necessary, you can bite and kill. However, I'm a witch doctor. I'm not bound by this rule." Gu Mengmeng ignored Leah and tried to retract her hand, but Leah tightened his grip. His brows were tightly furrowed. He just wanted her to take another look at him. Just one look would do. But in the end, she was still heartless. She kept turning her face to the side, not even willing to give him a glimpse out of the corner of her eye. Gu Mengmeng sat on Nina and stood up. She kicked Nina out of the blue and said, "Bring your female out of here or else I will kill you." Leah did not look at Nina, who was rolling and crawling on the ground. He only asked gently, as if he was whispering sweet nothings to her. "How do I kill her?" Gu Mengmeng sneered. "How about digging out my heart?" I forgot you don't have a heart." Leah lowered his head to look at his left chest that was throbbing in pain. He smiled bitterly. "Heartless? If there really isn't, that's fine too." Gu Mengmeng pulled her hand back with all her might, even at the risk of breaking her wrist. She struggled while saying, "Don't touch me with your dirty hands. I feel disgusted." In the end, Leah still let go. It was not because of Gu Mengmeng's words, but because she would get hurt if she struggled like that. At that time, he could look on coldly as Quentin almost strangled her to death. But now, he could not bear to even injure his wrist. Chapter 183. Gu Mengmeng didn't even look back as she turned and walked into the cave. Nina scrambled up and wanted to pounce on Leah, but she was so scared by Lee's cold stare that she didn't dare to move. Her mouth was full of blood, and she couldn't even speak properly. She mumbled, "You haven't been back for a few days, and I came to look for you because I was worried about you?" Who knew that Gu Mengmeng would be so barbaric and hit me the moment she came? Look at my face. How badly did she hit me? "Leah, you have to help me." Leah didn't say anything, but Elvis spoke up. "You want to touch my female in my territory? Do you think I'm dead?" "But..." Nina wanted to explain, but Elvis couldn't be bothered to talk to her. He just said, "If you don't want to be chased away before winter, don't appear in front of Xiao Meng again. Or else..." Elvis didn't finish his sentence. He just stretched out one hand and transformed it into a wolf's claw. He hammered the ground, creating a huge pit. Nina was so scared that she didn't dare to speak and just stood at the side, trembling. Gu Mengmeng's sobbing and Sandy's voice could be heard from the cave. Elvis looked at Leah with a frown and asked, "Why did you suddenly appear?" Leah lowered his head and looked at his own hand. He muttered to himself, "Her palm is injured. If she continues to hit it, it will bleed. It must be very painful." Elvis sighed. Actually, he noticed the red mark on Gu Mengmeng's palm, but he also knew how hard it was for Gu Mengmeng to hold it in for the entire day. She pretended to be cheerful and laughed out loud over just a small matter. She laughed so hard that it made one's heart ache. He would rather she let it out like this. It was better than holding it in. So even though he knew that her palm was injured when she was plucking the grass today, he didn't stop her from harming herself. Elvis sighed and didn't say anything else. He turned and entered the cave. Seeing that Elvis had entered, Sandy tactfully retreated out of the room. Elvis hugged Gu Mengmeng in his arms and spread open her hand. His heart ached, but he couldn't bear to blame her. Gu Mengmeng wiped her tears and tried to cover it up. "There's sand in my eyes. It hurts a little." Elvis hugged Gu Mengmeng and placed her on his chest. He said gently, "The sand is in your eyes. It must be very painful, right? It's good to cry a little. Cry the sand out and you won't be in pain anymore." Gu Mengmeng's tears, which she had finally stopped, started flowing again. She hugged onto Elvis's waist tightly and sobbed silently. When she was tired from crying, she directly fell asleep in Elvis's arms. When Gu Mengmeng woke up, it was already night time. Balder took Sandy back. Barit and the other two were still standing outside the cave, staring at the pile of potatoes on the ground. Gu Mengmeng felt a little embarrassed. She had asked him for help, but she only cared about tearing her love rival apart, leaving him hanging there for half a day. Just when she was thinking of how to speak without awkwardness, Colin scratched his head and stood out. He asked in embarrassment, "Gu Mengmeng, can I pluck some of this tomorrow?" Gu Mengmeng was taken aback for a moment before smiling. "You like it?" Colin nodded seriously and then promised, "I'll just pick a little to taste. Is that okay?" Barit punched Colin from behind and said, "You're so promising. Snatching food from a female?" Gu Mengmeng was teased by the two of them and her awkward mood dissipated. She waved her hands and said, "Aren't there some ready-made? Just eat it." Aside from the topic. Chapter 184. Colin was still a little embarrassed and shook his head. These are your food. I can't eat them. I have to leave them for you. Gu Mengmeng smiled. How much can you eat? This is at least 100 kilograms. Can you eat all of them? Colin nodded his head seriously and answered, yes. Gu Mengmeng could not hold it in and laughed out again. She said helplessly, then you can eat all of them and accompany me to pick new ones tomorrow. Colin thought for a while but did not do that, he said in a silly manner. Then I will wait until I pick new ones for you tomorrow before eating these old ones. Gu Mengmeng did not force Colin any further. The beast world had its own code of conduct. If she kept forcing Colin and he really ate these things, he might be laughed at by his fellow tribesmen. This would be a stain on his future partner. Gu Mengmeng did not force Colin any further. Gu Mengmeng said, everyone has been busy the whole day. You haven't eaten yet, right? It's just that it's so late. I don't know if we can still hunt. Elvis placed one hand on Gu Mengmeng's shoulder and smiled gently. What do you want to eat? I will find it for you. Gu Mengmeng thought for a while and said she wanted to eat bird eggs. This suggestion stunned Elvis and the rest. That thing was delicious? But since it was Gu Mengmeng who said it, there was naturally no reason for him to object. However, Elvis was not as skilled as Barit and Oakley when it came to climbing trees. Hence, the two of them accepted this task and transformed into a leopard and a lynx, disappearing into the night with a few leaps. Colin stayed behind to accompany Gu Mengmeng in processing the potatoes, while Elvis went to hunt for some large meat. He knew Gu Mengmeng was timid and did not dare to eat many things, so he processed them outside in advance and only brought back pieces of meat. Without a male's sharp sense of smell, Gu Mengmeng would not know what kind of animal it was. Of course, Gu Mengmeng also wisely chose not to ask. The stone pot was placed on the fire and Gu Mengmeng asked Elvis to cut the meat into smaller pieces, then put them into the pot with the peeled potato pieces to cook. Gu Mengmeng wrapped the dozen over bird eggs that Barit and Oakley brought back with mud and placed them outside the fire to simmer. When the meat was almost done, Gu Mengmeng used her fingernails to scrape some salt crystals into the pot and stirred it with her long chopsticks. Immediately, the fragrance wafted out. There were various cutlery that Elvis had made according to Gu Mengmeng's description at home, but it was rather comical to ask males who ate raw food to use chopsticks. Gu Mengmeng did not expect everyone to be a gentleman like the people in the civilized world. She simply picked up a few large pieces of meat and placed them on a thin plate made out of stones. She distributed them to everyone so that they could directly grab onto the meat and eat as freely as they wanted. Actually, according to the appetites of the males in the beast world, this pot of food was only enough for one person to fill their stomachs, much less for 5 people to share. So actually, everyone was just accompanying Gu Mengmeng to eat. Oakley said as he ate, I heard that the water shuttles you hung there are in preparation for winter? Gu Mengmeng nodded. Yeah. Marinating it like this will prevent it from spoiling easily. Oakley continued. Today, the males in the tribe have hunted quite a number of things, and they have all been cleaned and cut into pieces according to Elvis's request. I'll send them to you tomorrow for you to marinate. Gu Mengmeng was taken aback. Ah? You want me to marinate the entire tribe's food to survive the winter alone? Aside from the topic, she finally finished writing the part that needed to be updated. These few chapters did not talk about feelings as winter was coming and the most important thing now was to store food. Chapter 185. Oakley was also taken aback. Then he shook his head and said, Of course not. You just have to marinate your own food. Gu Mengmeng tilted her head and asked, Then why did you send the entire tribe's food to me? Oakley smiled and said, You are the first beauty of the tribe, of course you have the priority to choose the food. After you choose, it will be Nina, followed by Sandy and Maya. Gu Mengmeng raised her head and gestured for him to wait. Why should Nina choose first? Sandy and Maya are also females, they should also be protected and taken care of. Oakley blinked his eyes blankly and replied, Isn't this the order for a normal tribe? The first beauty takes priority, followed by the complete female, followed by the half-orc female, then the cubs. Gu Mengmeng snorted in disdain, then asked, Are there any cubs in St. Nazir? Why didn't I see any? Oakley hung his head and said dejectedly, there should have been. Who knew what Nina was up to? She actually forced Quentin to smash his own nest of eggs. Gu Mengmeng remembered that Nina had mentioned to Elvis previously, saying that she wanted to prove her fertility was strong before she gave birth to Quentin's cubs. But as the former first beauty of the tribe's first litter of babies, she wanted to leave it to Elvis, so she forced Quentin to smash his own nest of eggs. Thinking about it, it was really perverted. People said that even a vicious tiger would not eat its cubs. This Nina was really twisted. Gu Mengmeng was very resistant to talking about Nina, because she knew that she would not be able to say anything good about Nina. But it was not Gu Mengmeng's style to speak ill of others behind their backs. If there was something wrong, she would rebuke it in person. Gossiping about others behind their backs was too tasteless. So Gu Mengmeng clapped her hands and said, since there are no cubs, the single males can keep the prey for themselves. Tomorrow I will teach everyone how to marinate meat for better preservation. While the weather is still warm, everyone should store more food so that you won't starve in winter. As for the females, other than me, the other 3 have their own males. Let their males think of ways to get their own food. Of course, if any female suitor is willing to court my favor, I don't care, but I don't want this privilege. Barit and the other 2 looked at each other. They were so shocked by Gu Mengmeng's words that they could not say a word. Taking care of the females in the tribe was the responsibility of the males. Suddenly, I will be in charge of Xiao Meng's food. Elvis interrupted. Elvis said, Xiao Meng. Xiao Meng. Elvis said, Xiao Meng. Elvis Gu Mengmeng took the food and ate it in small bites. The potatoes were soft and smooth, and after adding salt, they tasted like the best in the world. Forgive her for living for a few days without salt. Gu, Gu, and Xiao, Xiao. Gu. Elvis said. He also took a bite of the cooked one, but he could only politely decline. Xiao, 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 Xiao to. Xiao tomorrow I, wolf, Xiao to Xiao, Xiao coal. Xiao to Xiao, Xiao, and said, Xiao, 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 Xiao. Colin was sneakily stuffing an uncooked potato into his mouth. Being called out by Barit, he blushed and passed the potato in his hand to Gu Mengmeng, then nodded and said, yeah, I'll go with Barit tomorrow. Out of topic. Thank you to QQ Reading Ryue, Xian, Qingfeng, 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 and Qingfeng for their tips. Recently, I've had a bad cold and made a lot of low-level mistakes in my writing, such as typing wrong names, typing wrong words, etc. Thank you for your understanding and help. I'll try my best to correct them. And then, the author has a heart of glass. When he's sick, he's especially pretentious. So, for the next few days, please praise him and bear with the criticism. You can criticize me after I've recovered from my cold. I've been very fragile recently and need love. Chapter 186. Oakley, who was trying his best to familiarize himself with Gu Mengmeng, fell into a rare silence. He stared at Gu Mengmeng for a moment before asking, do you really have a way to store food without spoiling it? Gu Mengmeng turned around and without much thought, she replied with a yeah. She even nodded her head. Oakley asked again, do you really want to teach everyone this method? Gu Mengmeng nodded again and said, yeah, why? Oakley remained silent for a moment before saying, do you know how effective a method to store food can be if used properly? Gu Mengmeng thought for a moment before replying, everyone can store more food in advance so that they won't have to suffer during winter. I have been hearing Sandy complain about starving during winter every day and my ears are already growing calluses. If I teach everyone this method, Sandy will have food to eat during winter and my ears will be saved. Yeah, this effect is really awesome, come. There should be applause here. Gu Mengmeng said as she took the lead to clap. The 4 males did not know what applause was, but they also imitated her stiffly and clapped their hands. Only after Gu Mengmeng made a keep hand gesture in satisfaction did Oakley dare to continue speaking. Winter is also known as the season of death. Many orcs die during winter every year. If you can store food without spoiling it for the entire winter, You will be the god of this world, and it will not be a problem for you to unify the entire beast world. But you just taught this method to everyone so easily? Just so that you don't have to listen to Sandy's nagging? Gu Mengmeng looked at Oakley's shocked and bewildered face and could not help but find it funny. She shrugged her shoulders and sent the potato into her mouth after blowing on it to cool it down. She savored the sweet and soft taste and smacked her lips. After thinking about it carefully, she opened her eyes in satisfaction and answered Oakley, I am not Qin Shi Huang and have no interest in unifying the world. I just hope that everyone I care about can live a little more happily. If the knowledge I know can achieve this goal, then I will be very satisfied. Moreover, the purpose of knowledge is to be spread and used. It is not a custom-made S&M underwear that can be hidden and ridiculed. Oakley did not say a word. Actually, he was already very confused when he accompanied Gu Mengmeng to collect honey previously. Fire was brought by the messengers of the beast deity 1,000 years ago. It symbolized absolute power and sacred authority. At that time, only the messenger's tribe had the right to protect the sacred fire. Once someone or tribe disobeyed, the flame devil would punish them without mercy. So even after 1,000 years, even though the sacred fire in the tribe of the messengers of the beast deity had long been extinguished and no one knew how to light a fire anymore, the messengers of the beast deity tribe still maintained a high level of authority in the beast world and very few people dared to defy them. But Gu Mengmeng actually used that sacred fire to roast meat, smoke yellow needle worms, boil water to cook, and even let Elvis and Leah teach the entire tribe how to use fire and how to prevent the flame of hope from turning into a flame devil. Now, she had taken out a method that could easily control the food storage in the beast world and shared it with everyone so casually. A quiet voice was awakening in Oakley's mind. Could it be that Gu Mengmeng? Oakley was shocked by his own thoughts. He stared at Gu Mengmeng in bewilderment. The expression on his face was really complicated. To Gu Mengmeng, it looked like she had seen a ghost. Aside from the topic, thank you, QQ Reading Baby, for your 399 points of view. The song is over, the ending is not beautiful. Sorry, I don't know how to type the special symbol in your name. I realized that there are a lot of tycoons among my babies. Thank you, thank you. I saw some readers complaining about my slow progress and asked why I am not getting to the main topic. Although I don't know what topic you want, let me give you a short-term schedule. Current mission: storing food, killing someone, survive the winter. Chapter 187. Gu Mengmeng looked at Oakley's expression as if he had bumped into a ghost and felt it was rather funny. Everyone had their own ambitions, was it not enough? Must everyone have the same wish? Gu Mengmeng turned back to look at Elvis and asked, Do you want to unify the beast world? Elvis looked into Gu Mengmeng's eyes and frowned slightly, as if he had fallen into an intense struggle. After a long while, he opened his mouth and asked, Unify the beast world. What's the price? Gu Mengmeng thought for a moment and replied, Probably because of loneliness. Everyone who stands at the peak and looks down on everyone else would find it hard to have anyone by their side. So in history, all the rulers would call themselves loners, loners who have no one to rely on. No one can be trusted and no one can be relied on. Your son might suddenly stretch out his sharp claws to you on a sunny afternoon, or your wife might suddenly strangle your neck in the dead of night. Not to mention your best friend. This is the price of power. It's very cruel but very real. If you want to have something, you have to give something. This is life. Looking at Gu Mengmeng's dramatic interpretation, Elvis suddenly heaved a sigh of relief. As if he had thought through something, he scooped the dancing Gu Mengmeng into his arms with a faint smile and rubbed the tip of his nose against her little face, saying, I'm not interested in unifying the beast world. I'm more interested to know what kind of price I have to pay to get you. Gu Mengmeng choked on Elvis's sudden confession and bounced up out of reflex. She laughed dryly and said, Why don't we talk about the 10,086 ways to unify the beast world? Oakley felt helpless. It turned out that their ambitious tribe leader, Elvis, was also this unambitious after meeting his beloved female. But why did he suddenly feel so envious? Oakley laughed at himself. He had already guessed Gu Mengmeng's identity, and he was very clear that it was a fool's dream for a first-level orc like him to become her male. As long as he could do something for her, it would be the highest honor. With this in mind, Oakley collected his emotions and said, "Then I'll look for Bode tomorrow to gather more yellow sauce. For Sandy, I don't think he will reject me." Upon hearing that, Gu Mingming's eyes lit up and she nodded her head in agreement. She thought for a while and said, "Remember, don't take away all of their honeycombs. Do some good deeds and leave half for them." Oakley did not understand the logic behind it, but since it was Gu Mengmeng who said it, he did not raise any objections and just nodded in agreement. After Barit and the other two left, Elvis cleaned up the cutlery and returned to the cave. He automatically transformed into a wolf and laid on the beast skin mat as a warm blanket. Gu Mengmeng originally did not have any psychological pressure towards Elvis in his original form, but his sudden confession today made her feel rather embarrassed. Elvis did not give Gu Mengmeng too much time to argue. He used his claws to tug and Gu Mengmeng fell into his arms. He used his front claws to hold Gu Mengmeng in place. Then, he placed his chin on her head and closed his eyes. Elvis slept soundly, but Gu Mengmeng could not. King pervert. Where are you putting your claws? My 36D became your mousepad just like that. Gu Mengmeng gritted her teeth and prepared to use the aura she used to deal with the pervert on the bus to teach this pervert a lesson. But when she looked up, she met Elvis's blue eyes. That disdainful look and his sharp fangs could be seen clearly from such a close distance. Actually, it was quite good for Elvis to be like this, right? Thinking from another angle, maybe it was her 36D that had taken advantage of Elvis's front claws, right? Aside from the topic, following Little Baby's request, I wrote a small drama. Actually, I'm not very good at it, but I'll give it a try. Gu Mengmeng. Elvis, I misjudged you. You are a pervert. Elvis, yeah, black. Gu Mengmeng was furious. She pointed at the entrance of the cave and shouted, "Get lost!" Elvis smiled calmly and pounced over to press Gu Mengmeng down. He said, "Let's do it step by step, all right?" Gu Mengmeng was dumbfounded. She asked, How do we do it by step?" Chapter 188. The next morning, Gu Mengmeng was woken up by a loud noise. Turning left and right, Gu Mengmeng almost plucked out all the hair on Elvis's stomach, but still could not block her ears. Jumping up from Elvis's arms like a carp, Gu Mengmeng rushed out of the cave with a strong smell of waking up. She rolled up her sleeves and scolded, "Damn it, disturbing my sleep is like killing my parents. It's an irreconcilable feud. I want to see who is the one who wants to die and disturbs my sleep." With Gu Mengmeng's roar, the outside of the cave instantly became silent. But it was too late for silence, because Gu Mengmeng had already rushed out with a pair of sleep-deprived eyes. The first thing she saw was Nina's face, which was getting more and more detestable by the day. Without saying a word, Gu Mengmeng went up and grabbed Nina's beast-skin dress, throwing her over her shoulder onto the ground. She flipped over and rode on her, raising her hand to hit her. This time, Nina was not her usual self. She did not provoke or retaliate, but wailed loudly, "Hit me? Hit me. Just hit me to death. It's better than having no food and starving to death in my own cave without anyone knowing." Sob, sob, sob. Gu Mengmeng, what exactly are you planning? Are you here to destroy Saint Nazir? Do you want all the females in the tribe to starve to death? Sob, sob. I can't live past this winter anyway. Rather than starving to death, why don't you just kill me now? Her crying stunned Gu Mengmeng. This time, it was not because of Leah. Gu Mengmeng dusted her hands and stood up. The lack of sleep made her extremely irritable, so she kicked Nina, who was rolling on the ground, and said, cry again, and I'll cut off your damn tongue." Frightened by Gu Mengmeng, Nina immediately kept quiet and covered her mouth with both her hands. She did not know if she was afraid of making a sound or to protect her own tongue, but she just stared straight at Gu Mengmeng with a pair of cross-eyed eyes while covering her mouth. Gu Mengmeng made a gesture of stabbing her eyes and said, look again, and I'll dig out your eyes." Nina was so frightened that she hurriedly closed her eyes tightly, showing an inexplicable wretched and funny look. Gu Mengmeng really could not bring herself to smile at Nina. She just frowned impatiently and said, "If you have something to say, just say it. You came here early in the morning to make a scene. Apart from wanting to get beaten up, do you have any higher level of pursuit?" Nina covered her mouth and stammered something. It was as if she was talking while brushing her teeth. Who could hear her clearly? Gu Mengmeng went up and slapped her hand away. With a cold face, she said, "Speak properly, scram after you're done." Nina felt wronged, but she did not dare to cry. She knew that with one word from Gu Mengmeng, Elvis would definitely pull out her tongue. So she replied while sobbing, "Why didn't you allow the males to give me their food? It's fine if you don't want it, but why can't I want it? After all, I'm a precious complete female. If I starve to death, do you know what kind of loss it would be to Saint Nazir?" Gu Mengmeng used her hand to cover her ears. She snorted in disgust, scaring Nina so much that she immediately shut her mouth. She looked at Gu Mengmeng and Elvis, who was already standing behind Gu Mengmeng with a face as black as a dark cloud. Looking into Elvis's eyes, Nina truly felt that a bolt of lightning could shoot out from Elvis's eyes at any time and strike her to death. Aside from the topic, because the effect of the recommendation this time was very good, QQ Bookstore has decided to add me as a recommendation. December 15th to December 19th is the recommendation period. According to the editor's request, I will add updates at a speed of 5 times a day. This recommendation is inseparable from the fact that my babies vote for me, leave messages and chase after my articles every day. Thank you, babies, for your support. I hope my babies will continue to work hard during the recommendation period. Try your best to ask QQ Bookstore and don't forget to vote and leave messages. Chapter 189. Gu Mengmeng looked at the males standing at the outskirts of Elvis's territory with large amounts of meat in their hands, as well as Sandy and Maya who were standing beside her. She did not answer Nina's question, but walked to Sandy and tidied her torn clothes and messy short hair. She sighed and said, "You are a bear after all. Why do you always look like you are in a worse state every time you fight with Nina? Don't tell me Nina's original form is a tiger or a lion." Sandy was more or less influenced by Gu Mengmeng recently and was no longer that afraid of Nina. Especially now that Gu Mengmeng was around, she became even more daring. She snorted at Nina and rolled her eyes before looking at Gu Mengmeng and said, "What lion or tiger? She is just a pheasant. She obviously can't fly, yet she still claims that she is a bird." Previously, she used the fact that Quentin was the only male in Saint Nazir who could fly, so she swaggered around and made many unreasonable requests. But Leah and Elvis saw that she was a complete female and Quentin was indeed capable, so they satisfied her. Now that Quentin can't fly and she no longer has the title of the first beauty in the tribe, she still wants to bully others. "I won't tolerate it anymore." Gu Mengmeng nodded her head in relief, then patted Sandy's shoulder and said, "That's right, but next time when you beat her up again, just transform and slap her to death with your bare paw. Don't give her a chance to whine. It's too noisy, understand?" Sandy blinked her eyes and looked at Gu Mengmeng, then at Elvis before saying softly, "Saint Nazir has a rule that we cannot kill our own tribesmen." Gu Mengmeng chuckled and said, "When I said slap her to death, I was describing her to death, not really asking you to break her to death. It's not good to dirty your own hands. But breaking an arm or a leg is still possible. Isn't winter coming soon? Treat it as an additional dish." Once she said that, not only Nina, even Sandy looked at Gu Mengmeng with a horrified expression. Gu Mengmeng glanced at Nina, whose face had turned green from fright, thinking that this girl would not dare to casually provoke Sandy in the future. Then, he changed the topic and pulled Sandy's little hand to ask, "Do you also think that I'm wrong to tell the single males not to share food with the females?" Sandy shook his head and said, "I don't know what's right and what's wrong. I only know that I'll listen to what you say." Gu Mengmeng chuckled. She could not deny that Sandy's blind worship of Gu Mengmeng had fully satisfied her vanity, and this trust made Gu Mengmeng feel even more warm. Gu Mengmeng held Sandy's little hand and turned to look at Maya. "What about you? What do you think?" Maya was a little timid but obviously did not dare to express her true thoughts. She just bit her lower lip and moved closer to Gu Mengmeng, whispering, "I believe. You won't harm us. I'll listen to you." Gu Mengmeng nodded before turning back to face Nina. She smiled sarcastically and said, "So you're the only one who has an opinion?" Nina hardened her heart. This matter concerned the food for the winter. Even if she was afraid of Gu Mengmeng beating her, she could not back down. So she nodded her head firmly, silently imagining how tragic she must look at that moment. She was like a lone island in the vast ocean, not backing down no matter how the waves hit her. She must look extremely beautiful. All the males would instantly feel pity and admiration for her at that moment. However, she neglected an objective fact. That was, wherever Gu Mengmeng was, other than her own partners, no one would even look at her. Aside from the topic, regarding the question about Nina's original form, I saw all sorts of answers in the comments. The correct answer has been announced. Is there anyone who guessed correctly? Chapter 190. Gu Mengmeng hugged her shoulders and leaned into Elvis's arms. She leaned against Elvis's chest and stood there quietly without saying a word. "If you are unhappy, you can choose to leave Saint Nazir," Elvis said coldly from above. Gu Mengmeng's lips curled up slightly. She had to admit that Elvis's attitude of standing firmly on her side without asking for right or wrong pleased her. Of course, she knew what a female meant to a tribe and she would not give up on a female so easily. Even if it was Nina, didn't she endure for so long for the development of Saint Nazir? However, reasoning was one thing and attitude was another. Gu Mengmeng had never liked to cause trouble for others. Since Elvis supported her unconditionally, she naturally would not make things difficult for him. So Gu Mengmeng gave Nina a way out of the embarrassing situation. Or you can ask your males to learn how to marinate meat with everyone else, so that you can store enough food before winter arrives. Nina did not say a word. She just bit her lower lip and shook her head fiercely before taking a few steps to the side. Gu Mengmeng watched as the troublesome fellow walked away. She then waved at everyone, indicating that they could bring their own meat over. Although the males were not as orderly as the People's Liberation Army, they still stood in an orderly manner. They maintained a shoulder's distance from each other in front of Gu Mengmeng and waited for her next instruction. Gu Mengmeng took out the salt crystals that Elvis had crushed into powder and demonstrated how to marinate meat. Then, she pointed at the small mountain of salt crystals piled up in the open space and asked everyone to marinate it according to their own method. After everyone was done marinating, she then taught everyone how to use tree branches and vines to dry the meat in the shade. After explaining everything, Gu Mengmeng and Sandy interspersed themselves in between the males to give them appropriate guidance and correction. Although the males could not understand this strange method, how would they have the chance to interact so closely with the females? Just for this, it was worth it to starve to death during winter. What's more, these things were originally meant for the 4 females in the tribe, but now they had become his reserve rations. It was already good enough to have something to eat during the winter. Whether it tasted good or not, in fact, was not that important. Thus, the group of people began to marinate the meat in full swing, and then hung it up to dry. Everything seemed to be in order. "Bah!" The discordant voice sounded again. Gu Mengmeng did not even need to turn her head to know that the hoarse voice was Nina's doing. She looked back sharply and saw Nina spitting something on the ground, pointing at Quentin and scolding, "Why are you being picky? It was disgusting. This is simply a waste of food. Don't you know that I already have very little food this winter? Are you trying to starve me to death?" Gu Mengmeng wanted to speak up, but Sandy had told her not to interfere with other people's family matters. Zhou Yu was beating up Huang Gai. One was willing to take the beating while the other was willing to take the beating. What right did she have to say anything? Thus, Gu Mengmeng forced herself to pretend that she did not hear Nina's indirect scolding and continued to guide the other males to marinate the meat. Seeing that Gu Mengmeng did not have any reaction, Nina gave herself a thumbs up in her heart, feeling that she had the upper hand this time. But considering Gu Mengmeng's usual behavior of not making a fuss if she could make a move, Nina decided to stop while she was ahead. Thus, she shook her plump buttocks and one of her partners transformed into a beast for her to ride on. She said with her nose facing the sky, "Let's go home. Don't waste the food here. If you have the time, hurry up and help me catch more prey." "What are you wasting time for, Humph?" Aside from the topic, many times the males say that we are pretentious, but what we are doing is just to see your accommodating attitude. When a girl is crying, no amount of reasoning is as effective as a hug. Chapter 191. Without Nina messing around, the pickling process went smoothly. Gu Meng Meng and Sandy brought Maya along to sit at the side and chat. It was around noon when Barit and Colin came back. The two of them were almost buried by the potatoes. From afar, it looked like 2 piles of potatoes had turned into spirits and were walking towards them. After they put down the potatoes, Colin walked towards Gu Meng Meng with a red face. He took out something from behind and passed it to Gu Meng Meng. "This was accidentally plucked when I was plucking the potatoes. I've tried it and it's very delicious too. Do you want it?" Gu Meng Meng's eyes brightened. She patted Colin's shoulder. "Not bad, Colin. You even managed to find it. Where did you find it? Are there many?" Seeing that Gu Meng Meng liked it, Colin smiled till his eyes were squinted. He scratched his head. "It's just beside the potato field. It's not too far away. It's not as many as the potatoes, but it's not too little either." Gu Meng Meng held onto Colin's hand excitedly. "Bring me to take a look, all right?" Colin's face turned even redder. He turned his face to the other side. He lowered his head and peeked at Gu Meng Meng from the corner of his eyes. Then he nodded. Gu Meng Meng was so happy that she jumped on the spot. She leaped onto Elvis. "Elvis, let's go pluck some sweet potatoes." Elvis naturally followed Gu Meng Meng's wishes. He brought her towards the direction of the potato field. Barit followed behind them. As Colin was busy taking deep breaths, he walked slightly later. Just as he was about to leave, he realized that a corner of his beast skin dress was being pinched by Sandy. Colin tilted his head and looked at Sandy. "Why? You want to eat it too? Then I'll discuss it with Gu Meng Meng. She's so close to you. She'll definitely be willing to share it with you." Sandy shook her head. She forced a smile. "I won't snatch Gu Meng Meng's things." Colin did not say a word. He wanted to leave, but when he saw that Sandy was still tugging on the corner of his dress, he asked, "Then do you have anything else?" Sandy bit her lower lip and said, "I fought with Nina again today." Colin chuckled and said, "I've heard about this. I feel that Gu Meng Meng is still right. You have to bring out Gu Meng Meng's strength and send Nina flying with a slap. Let's see if she still dares to make a fuss next time. That's why Gu Meng Meng is the first beauty of the tribe. She has a beautiful heart too. It's really nice no matter how I look at her." Sandy slowly loosened his grip and nodded with a smile. "Yes, you're right. I'm fine now. Hurry and bring Gu Meng Meng to find that mud ball. She seems to like it very much. Who knows, if she's happy, you can stay in Elvis's cave this winter." Hearing this, Colin's heart, which had finally calmed down, started beating again. He patted Sandy's shoulder and said with a silly smile, "What are you talking about?" "I don't dare to think like that." Sandy looked at his shoulder, which had turned red from the patting, and laughed bitterly in his heart. He sighed and said, "Look at you, you can't even see your eyes from smiling. You still don't dare to think about it? You must be thinking so much that you're going crazy, right? Hurry and chase after her. If you don't, Gu Meng Meng will be far away." Hearing Sandy's words, Gu Meng Meng then realized that Elvis had already brought Gu Meng Meng far away. She smacked her head and said, "Aya, I won't say any more. I'm going to lead the way for Gu Meng Meng." Looking at Colin, who was running away in a hurry, Sandy's originally smiling lips slowly pursed into a straight line. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she stubbornly refused to let them fall. She placed her chubby little hand on her left chest and murmured to Colin's back view, "I won't snatch Gu Meng Meng's things. I won't snatch Gu Meng Meng's things." Aside from the topic, sigh, Colin is such a blockhead. Sometimes I really feel that he deserves to be single. She thought of a story. A girl asked a guy to watch a movie, then reminded him, "Remember to bring your identification card." Then, the guy used 2 hours to tell the girl not to check her identification card when watching a movie. Chapter 192. When Gu Mengmeng followed Colin to the sweet potato field, she felt that her life was too blissful. Staple food. This was the damn staple food. She shook Elvis's arm in agitation and pointed at the sweet potato field. Unable to say a word, Elvis rubbed Gu Mengmeng's little head lovingly, then turned back slightly and gave a signal. The group of males behind him all stepped forward and started plucking the sweet potatoes. Why a group? Ha! Everyone heard Sandy and Colin's conversation. Who wouldn't want to seize this opportunity to perform well? If they could really gain Gu Mengmeng's favor before winter, that would be the pinnacle of their lives. Even if they could not, it would be glorious to be able to serve the first beauty of the tribe. For the entire afternoon, Gu Mengmeng was in charge of sitting in Elvis's arms and smiling foolishly, then watching everyone transport the sweet potatoes that were as tall as a hill back to St. Nazaire. Under Gu Mengmeng's insistence, the sweet potato leaves were also brought back. When they returned to St. Nazaire, Oakley and Bode had already returned and were distributing the honey they had gathered into bowls and basins in Gu Mengmeng's house. Sandy was following behind Bode with her eyes full of hearts, stealing a mouthful of the honey that Bode secretly gave her from time to time. Gu Mengmeng happily went forward to greet them, then took out a clean sweet potato for Sandy. Sandy took over the sweet potato and took a bite without saying anything, then exclaimed in surprise, "So sweet!" Gu Mengmeng pointed behind her with her thumb, then turned her body sideways and Sandy saw the sweet potatoes that were as tall as a hill. She hugged Gu Mengmeng happily and jumped high on the spot. Gu Mengmeng said, "I definitely can't finish all these by myself. You and Maya should also bring some back to store during winter. I will share the rest with the males in the tribe." The males in the tribe were all stunned. Since ancient times, only males would find food for females. There had never been a male who ate the food brought back by a female. Even though none of these things were plucked by Gu Mengmeng herself, they still belonged to Gu Mengmeng. Sandy was also unhappy. She dug her lips and said, "We already don't eat the prey brought back by the males this winter. Can't we just split it among the three of us?" Gu Mengmeng found it funny and asked, "So much? It's at least 1,000 pounds. Can you finish it?" Sandy looked at the sweet potatoes and thought back to the crispy taste just now. She swallowed her saliva and nodded. Gu Mengmeng face-palmed and laughed helplessly. "You little glutton. Aren't you afraid your heart will burn from eating sweet potatoes the whole winter? Don't you want to eat the fish and meat we've preserved?" Looking at the water shuttles and various kinds of meat hanging on the tree, Sandy blinked her eyes and rubbed her stomach. "Then I can give them a little, but only a little." Gu Mengmeng smiled. "All right, I'll give them a little." Maya walked to Gu Mengmeng and asked timidly, "Gu Mengmeng, I don't want the sweet potato. Can you give me some of that leaf?" Gu Mengmeng turned around and looked at the sweet potato leaves Maya was pointing at, asking, "You like to eat this?" Maya nodded, her eyes full of desire. Gu Mengmeng agreed readily. "Sure. There's a lot of this. I'll keep some to make soup. You and Sandy can share the rest." Sandy immediately opened her mouth and said, "I don't want the leaves. I'll give you all my leaves in exchange for the sweet potatoes. All right?" Maya nodded, and just like that, the two of them happily came to an agreement. Aside from the topic, I suddenly thought of a song that suited Sandy very well. So hungry, I'm really so hungry. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.